Meghan is hardly innocent. She's down in the dirt with me, whether she likes it or not.
The story you're about to hear doesn't begin with whispers or rumors. It begins with collapse. Royal, global, public collapse. Prince Andrew, once considered a steady if quiet figure in the royal family, became a symbol of something darker, something unforgivable. The ties to Jeffrey Epstein weren't vague. They were documented, photographed, repeated, denied. Then finally, undeniable. Virginia Roberts stepped forward and the world changed. Accusations swept headlines. Legal teams mobilized. The palace reacted. Titles were stripped. Doors were slammed shut. Andrew didn't just fall from grace. He was ejected from it, erased. But in that same moment, as one member of the royal family was collapsing under the weight of scandal, another was rising, quietly, carefully. Meghan Markle. She wasn't yet a duchess. She wasn't married into the crown. She was, in the public's eyes, a television actress finding love with a prince, an outsider welcomed in, a modern fairy tale. But for those who watched closely, for those who knew what to look for, something didn't quite add up. Because Meghan, like Andrew, had moved through certain circles, private circles, high society networks, invitations-only events where names like Epstein weren't mentioned in whispers. They were accepted as fact. And yet, when Andrew's world burned to the ground, Meghan's remained untouched. No press questions, no headlines, no legal inquiries, nothing. Not a word. And that silence? It wasn't comforting, it was deafening. Because silence in a scandal like this doesn't mean innocence, it means protection. You have to ask yourself, why? Why was one royal exiled, erased, publicly condemned, while another, allegedly connected to the same orbit, was elevated, celebrated, protected? It's not just about what was said, it's about what wasn't. The press who chased Andrew like bloodhounds? Silent. The palace that yanked his titles with surgical precision? Still. The global institutions that devoured every hint of royal controversy? They turned their eyes away. They looked elsewhere, away from Meghan. And that silence, more than any headline or photo, is what makes this story explosive. Because silence takes effort. Silence requires power. And the bigger the silence, the darker the truth it might be hiding. What if Meghan's story, the one we were told, isn't the full version? What if the modern royal fairy tale wasn't just crafted, but calculated? There is a line drawn in this story, one we're not supposed to cross. It divides scandal from silence, exile from elevation, and it begins with one question. Why was Prince Andrew destroyed, but Meghan protected? As we start to peel back the layers, you'll see that the answer isn't gentle. It isn't vague. It's sharp, personal. And if true, it changes everything we think we know. Not just about Meghan, but about the monarchy itself. Because behind every silence, there is a secret, and we're about to follow the echo. You see, Meghan wasn't just another celebrity brushing shoulders at events. Not according to the people who were there. Not according to the whispers that have never quite died. Because before there was a wedding, before the headlines, before Harry, there was Andrew. Sources close to the royal circle allege something that has never been publicly addressed. That Prince Andrew and Meghan Markle had a personal connection long before she ever met Harry. Not an accidental encounter. Not a chance hello at a fundraiser. A personal, repeated, and, if the whispers are to be believed, private relationship. Andrew, they say, confided in friends. He told them he knew Meghan, that they weren't strangers, that their connection went deeper than anyone was ever told. What kind of connection? No one will say on record. But off the record, the words are less careful, less diplomatic. Not a friendship, not a mentorship, a relationship. And that single detail, if true, rewrites the entire royal script we've been sold. Because if Meghan was already connected to Andrew, then her entrance into the royal world wasn't from the outside. It wasn't a romantic miracle or a cultural breakthrough. It was a move from inside the circle, a calculated step into a system she already had ties to. The palace never acknowledged it. The press never investigated it. No one asked how she met him. No one asked how close they were. No one asked why, when Andrew's scandal broke, this alleged connection was never addressed. Not once. The silence was total. And again, silence doesn't erase history, it buries it. Imagine this. A man loses everything because of his proximity to a criminal. A woman allegedly tied to the same man in the same world walks free, rises, marries into the very institution that erased him. It's not coincidence, it's not oversight. It's orchestration. The timeline tells its own story. When Andrew's scandal hit, when Epstein's name became global poison, the world demanded consequences. They got Andrew, but not Meghan. No pressure, no questions, no accountability. How do you explain that? Some say Meghan was protected, not just by PR teams, but by forces within the institution itself. People who feared what else might be unearthed if the wrong questions were asked. Because if Meghan had a past with Andrew, if she was part of that social orbit, then exposing her wouldn't just embarrass her. It could implode the royal family. Again. And so the silence held. But silence is fragile. It cracks when pressure builds. It breaks when someone finally decides to speak. And behind palace walls, there are whispers that Andrew, bitter, abandoned, erased, is ready to speak. If he does, the question isn't what he'll say. The question is, why was it hidden in the first place? Because if Meghan was already known to Andrew, if their history runs deeper than the palace ever admitted, then the story we've been sold wasn't the truth. It was a cover story. And it's unraveling. In stories like this, details matter. Photographs matter, patterns matter, not because they prove guilt, but because they map a world no one wants you to see. In 2014, long before the royal wedding, before the tabloid frenzy, before the Duchess title, a series of photographs quietly surfaced. They showed Meghan Markle, not at a film set, not at a charity gala, but aboard a yacht. A sleek, luxurious, sunlit yacht off the coast of the Mediterranean. There were no press photographers, no official events, just a glimpse into a private world most people never even get near. At first glance, it seemed innocent. A vacation, a moment of luxury. Nothing unusual for an actress working her way through Hollywood and international events, but when you look closer, when you place that photo against the backdrop of everything that followed, it stops being innocent. It becomes a key. Because this wasn't a public cruise, it wasn't a press junket or industry mixer, it was private, invitation only. And the people who show up on yachts like that aren't just random guests. They're vetted, chosen, connected. And that's where the connection to Karina Shuliak enters the story. Shuliak, not a royal, not a celebrity, but Epstein's final known girlfriend. In one of the few interviews she ever gave, Shuliak made something clear. The only time she traveled by yacht or private plane were when Epstein arranged it. These weren't social trips, they were part of a private ecosystem, an inner circle that operated outside the public eye, carefully, methodically, secretively. That's the world Meghan was photographed in. Same timeline, same social orbit, same elite, insulated environment. And suddenly, the yacht is no longer a backdrop, it's a doorway. Because if Meghan was on a private vessel like that, outside of press channels, away from her acting work, without a clear public-facing reason, the natural question becomes who invited her, who arranged it, and why. It might have passed quietly, just another celebrity enjoying the perks of rising fame, except for one thing, the timing. Because those photos align almost exactly with the period Prince Andrew was allegedly most active in Epstein's inner world. Parties, trips, yachts, names that weren't on guest lists, but always present. Now step back for a moment. Imagine you're not Meghan. You're anyone else, a royal connected to Epstein's orbit, a celebrity seen aboard a private Epstein-linked vessel. Imagine that photo emerging after Andrew's collapse. Would the press ignore it? Would the palace say nothing? Would the story vanish? No, it would explode. But for Meghan, it didn't. And again, that silence tells us more than the photo ever could. Because a photo can be denied, a connection can be reframed. But silence? Silence is a strategy. And when it's deployed this widely across the press, the palace, the legal world, it means someone is protecting something very valuable. Or someone very dangerous. The photo hasn't disappeared. It's still searchable. Still circulating in certain online forums and archives, but it's been stripped of context. Presented as lifestyle content. As if it belongs to a different timeline. But it doesn't. It belongs to this one. To the same timeline that saw Andrew dragged through courts and headlines while Meghan's name vanished from every connection. And when you remember that she was allegedly close to Andrew before Harry, when you remember that she wasn't just standing near the edge of power, but allegedly inside the same circles, the image takes on a different weight. This wasn't proximity, it was presence. And presence matters. Because when scandals erupt, when lives are ruined, when reputations collapse, when empires fall, it's not always the actions that damn you. Sometimes it's where you stood and who you stood beside. Virginia Roberts wasn't a tabloid headline. She wasn't a rumor. She wasn't a conspiracy theory floating through the internet. She was the witness. The woman who stood in front of the world and pointed directly at Prince Andrew, not with speculation, but with testimony. She didn't write anonymous blog posts. She didn't whisper in the shadows. She stood in courtrooms under oath and told her story. A story that broke the royal armor around Andrew and forced the palace to act. But there's something most people don't know about that story. Something that never made it to the press conferences. Something that was reportedly whispered behind the closed doors of attorneys, investigators, and witnesses. That Virginia Roberts at one point allegedly wanted Meghan Markle called to testify. Let that sink in. Not because Meghan was a duchess, not because she married Harry, but because, according to these claims, Meghan was believed to be a close past associate of Prince Andrew. Not an outsider, not a stranger. Someone who might have seen the world Virginia was trapped in. And that request, if true, is explosive. Because witnesses aren't selected randomly. They aren't pulled from celebrity lists or royal directories. They're chosen based on proximity, based on relevance, based on what they might know. For Meghan's name to be on that list, for it to even be whispered in the same breath as Epstein's inner circle, means someone believes she had knowledge, not gossip, not press rumors, first-hand awareness. The logic was simple. If Meghan had a personal relationship with Andrew before Harry, as multiple sources allege, then she may have been present in private spaces, elite parties, or exclusive gatherings where things happened. Things that later the world would try to understand. The idea was never to accuse Meghan of a crime. That was never the angle. The angle was awareness. Had she seen something, heard something? Was she present when introductions were made? When powerful men moved freely through shadowed networks? Was she a quiet observer or something else? We may never know the full answer, because that request, that alleged effort to call Meghan as a witness, vanished. Her name was never officially listed. No subpoena was filed. No testimony ever scheduled. It was like it never happened. But that's the strange part. Because if the legal team truly believed Meghan had nothing to offer, no relevance, no connection, then why even consider her? Why raise the name of a global celebrity? Only to bury it again? That kind of decision doesn't happen casually. Someone changed their mind, or someone applied pressure. And just like that, Meghan's name disappeared from the case, from the public records, from the conversation, from everything. As if that entire chapter of her life, the alleged ties to Andrew, the yacht, the elite circles, was erased by an invisible hand. And again, we return to the silence. Because this wasn't just media silence. This was legal silence, institutional silence, the kind that only exists when powerful interests converge. You would think the press would ask questions. You would think the lawyers would be curious. You would think the palace, desperate to avoid another scandal, would want clarity. But no one spoke. No one asked. No one wanted to open that door. Because if they had, even for a moment, the illusion would have cracked. And once cracked, the truth always leaks out. That's the danger, and that's why in this story, the silence is more terrifying than the scandal, because scandals can be explained. But silence? Silence means someone decided the truth was too dangerous to handle, and so it was buried, but not forgotten. To understand how Meghan Markle reached the heart of the royal family, you have to rewind. Not to her wedding, not to the engagement, but further. Back to a time when she wasn't a duchess, wasn't a global name, wasn't even particularly well known. She was a working actress based in Toronto, starring in a mid-tier television drama called Suits. Not a blockbuster, not a hit show, just another role in a city full of talent. She played her part, she filmed her scenes, and she lived a relatively quiet life. But then something shifted, because somewhere along that timeline, Meghan's world changed, and it didn't happen slowly. It happened sharply. Suddenly, she wasn't just an actress. She was moving in circles most actors never even glimpse. Exclusive dinners, private gatherings, Soho House events that don't make it to Instagram. Her name began to appear beside names that held power. Not celebrity power, but financial power, political power, royal power. How? That's where Marcus Anderson comes in. Anderson wasn't a co-star or a fellow actor. He wasn't in film or television at all. He was a senior executive at Soho House, a global members-only club system with a reputation for secrecy, influence, and access. If Hollywood has red carpets, Soho House has quiet rooms with no cameras. If the palace has corridors of power, Soho House has dining rooms where power quietly eats, and that's where Meghan went. Not by chance, by introduction. Sources close to the scene say Anderson didn't just meet Meghan, he took an interest. He opened doors. He connected her to people who don't take meetings. He brought her into a world most will never even know exists. It started in Toronto, with the local Soho House set, but it didn't stay there. Through Anderson, Meghan allegedly connected with Jessica Mulroney, whose ties to Canadian political royalty and high fashion gave her reach far beyond red carpets. From there, the links grew. Events in New York, dinners in London, private parties where royalty, wealth, and power were not just present, they were expected. This wasn't networking, this was positioning, and Meghan played it well. There's nothing illegal about it, no scandal in having ambition. But when you step back, when you look at how quickly Meghan went from Toronto actress to palace insider, you have to ask the question, was this luck or was it a climb? Because the moves were precise, strategic, one name leading to the next, one circle replacing the last, one set of introductions that slowly, steadily pushed her closer and closer to the crown. Before anyone in the press ever mentioned her name beside Harry's, Meghan was already navigating worlds that led directly to royal access. And if you follow those lines, backward and forward, a different picture emerges. Not of a woman swept into royalty by love, but of someone who found the staircase and climbed. And where did that staircase lead? According to the claims, not just toward Harry, but toward Andrew. Because long before Harry ever entered the picture, Meghan had allegedly already positioned herself in Andrew's world. Not officially, not publicly, but socially, privately. And that is where this story pivots again. Because it's not just about who opened the doors for Meghan, it's about which doors she chose to walk through, and what was waiting on the other side. Fairy tales are built on romance, on chance encounters, on moments of magic that feel too perfect to be planned. But what if that magic was manufactured? What if the story didn't begin with Harry? What if it began with someone else entirely? According to multiple sources close to the royal periphery, Meghan Markle's path toward the palace wasn't a romantic whirlwind, it was a campaign. Focused, strategic, calculated, and Prince Harry was never the first goal. He was the backup plan. Because the man she allegedly had her eyes on from the beginning was Prince Andrew. Older, already inside the monarchy, already established. Andrew may not have been beloved, but he held what mattered most in elite circles: access, status, royal infrastructure, a seat at the table. And for someone on the rise, someone moving swiftly through elite society, Andrew represented a direct entry point into royalty itself. He was, to some, the last open door. Sources claim that Meghan didn't stumble into Andrew's circle. She entered deliberately, repeatedly. She attended the same events, brushed against the same networks, and made sure her presence didn't go unnoticed. It wasn't subtle, it was layered. And it didn't take long before insiders began whispering the same question. Was Meghan aiming for Andrew? Not as a mentor, not as a friend, but as a royal match. The idea may sound wild at first, but look closer. The age difference wouldn't have been an obstacle. In elite circles, age is flexible when influence is involved. Andrew's reputation, though already shadowed by private murmurs, hadn't yet collapsed publicly. He was still a prince, still a gatekeeper, still a viable connection to power, but standing between Meghan and Andrew was a barrier, a very old, very loyal one. Sarah Ferguson, Fergie, Andrew's ex-wife, his longest-standing ally, the mother of his children. But more than that, his defender, his filter, his wall. Fergie knew the palace, knew the press, knew the stakes, and according to those familiar with the internal dynamics, Fergie saw Meghan coming and blocked her. She didn't allow the relationship to develop. She didn't let the association deepen. Whether it was instinct or strategy, Fergie moved to protect Andrew's inner circle from outside entry. And just like that, Meghan was shut out. The door didn't swing open, it slammed shut. But here's where the story bends. Because when one path closes, another begins. And that's when Meghan's orbit shifted, not away from royalty, but toward a different prince, Harry. You could argue it was fate, that love simply rerouted the narrative. But the proximity is too close, the timeline too tight, the opportunities too perfectly aligned. If Meghan couldn't connect through Andrew, there was still another entry point into the firm, one younger, more vulnerable, less protected, Harry. He was the spare, the rebel, the one who didn't play by the rules, the one who still had his mother's distrust of the palace and her deep, aching need for love. And Meghan stepped in. By the time their relationship began, Meghan already had years of elite social conditioning behind her. She knew how to speak to power. She knew how to hold a room. She knew how to disarm resistance. And she knew, whether consciously or not, that Harry was open. The question is not whether Meghan loved Harry. The question is whether that love was the plan or the pivot. Because if she originally aimed for Andrew, if the strategic connection failed, then Harry wasn't the beginning of the story. He was the adjustment. And the most explosive part? It worked. Because unlike Andrew, Harry had no Fergie. No one stood between them. No one blocked the calls. No one stopped the progression. What started as an unexpected match, a Hollywood actress and a royal heir, became within months a global media obsession. And then a wedding. And then a duchess. And suddenly Meghan wasn't just near the monarchy, she was inside it. But behind that crown, behind the dress, behind the press releases and official portraits, there's a shadow, a question still hanging in the air. What if Harry was never the original plan? And if that's true, what does that say about everything that followed? For a long time, Harry believed he was escaping the press, the protocols, the palace corridors that echoed with whispers and judgment. When he met Meghan, it felt like freedom, like stepping into a new world with someone who stood outside the games he'd grown to hate. She was different, he said. She wasn't raised in that royal machine. She didn't play by those cold rules. He fell hard, he cut ties, he burned bridges. For the first time in his life, he believed he was choosing love over duty. And for a while, he was happy. But love is not immune to truth. And the truth, if the sources are to be believed, began to creep in slowly. At first, it was quiet. A comment from a relative. A story in a tabloid that felt a little too specific. A name mentioned in passing, not in headlines, but behind closed doors. Prince Andrew. It didn't make sense at first. Why would people mention Meghan in the same breath as Andrew? Why would anyone connect her to a man Harry had worked hard to distance himself from? A man whose scandal had nearly fractured the monarchy? At first he rejected it, dismissed it, assumed it was more of the same cruelty he'd grown used to. His family didn't trust outsiders, they didn't like strong women. Of course they would try to undermine her, but the whispers didn't stop. They grew. Old acquaintances from Meghan's past came forward, not in public, but privately. They spoke of events, of photos, of sightings and timelines that didn't quite match the official story. Mentions of yachts, of Toronto dinner parties, of introductions long before Harry ever entered the picture. And slowly, Harry began to question. He asked, she denied, he pushed, she redirected, but the questions didn't disappear. They multiplied. Why had she never told him about Andrew? Why had no one in the palace ever acknowledged their alleged connection? Why had her name even briefly been floated as a potential witness in the Virginia Roberts case? These weren't tabloid rumors anymore, they were echoes of something much deeper. Something he had never been told. And that's when it broke. According to insiders, Harry eventually stopped defending Meghan in private. He grew quiet, withdrawn. The man who once shouted down the press and turned his back on his family started asking his own questions. He didn't make statements. He didn't file for separation. But behind closed doors, something shifted. The trust was fractured, because if Meghan had known Andrew before him, if she had allegedly aimed for Andrew before pivoting to him, then Harry wasn't chosen for love. He was chosen for access, and that realization shattered him. Imagine discovering that the very thing you thought you'd escaped, manipulation, positioning, quiet strategy, was now living in your home. Imagine realizing that the love story you believed in might have been built on omission. Harry was far from his family, far from his homeland, trapped in a new life that now felt eerily familiar, alone. Sources say his mental health declined, that his confidence, once so bold and rebellious, gave way to anxiety and retreat, that even the couple's public smiles grew thinner, more strained. Because behind the scenes, Harry was wrestling with something no prince is trained to handle: betrayal. Not by his enemies, but by the person he trusted most. He wasn't just a husband anymore. He was a man haunted by a question he couldn't unask. Did she ever really love me? Or did she just need me? And that question, quiet, internal, devastating, became the prison. Because if the answer was what he feared, then everything he left behind, his family, his duties, his identity, was gone for nothing. You'd think a scandal like this would make headlines. You'd think the press, relentless, hungry, obsessed with royal controversy, would dive in head first. A duchess allegedly tied to a disgraced prince. Photos, timelines, witness rumors, all the ingredients of a media storm, and yet, silence. Total. Controlled. Unyielding. The question is not why didn't the press expose this? The real question is who stopped them? Because by the time Prince Andrew was stripped of his titles, when his association with Epstein was laid bare for the world, the palace had already proven one thing: they would act when forced. They would sever ties to protect the crown. But when it came to Meghan, nothing. Not even a whisper. Why? Because according to insiders, the palace wasn't just aware of Meghan's alleged past. They were terrified of it. 3 fears, they say. 3 reasons the silence held. Not out of compassion, but out of calculation. Fear 1, Prince Harry's mental state. From the very beginning, Harry had been emotionally volatile. Not in a dangerous way, but in a way that alarmed the family. His grief, his resentment, his deep mistrust of the press and palace, it all lived just beneath the surface. When he fell in love with Meghan, it was like a lifeline. He changed, he softened, he stood taller. And then as cracks began to show, the palace watched in silence. Because they knew, if the full truth came out, if Harry learned that Meghan had allegedly targeted Andrew first, or that she may have been closer to Epstein's orbit than anyone ever admitted, he wouldn't just be embarrassed, he would break. And the palace wasn't willing to risk a public collapse, a prince unraveling on the global stage, a royal marriage imploding in real time. They chose silence to protect Harry from the fallout, or perhaps to protect themselves from what he might say once broken. Fear 2, a second Epstein explosion. Andrew's scandal nearly brought the monarchy to its knees. For months, the institution was battered by headlines, court cases, documentaries. He was removed, his reputation unrecoverable, but the family survived. Barely. If Meghan were linked, even indirectly, to the same orbit, it wouldn't be survivable. Because Meghan wasn't a sidelined royal. She was the face of the new monarchy. Diverse, modern, global. She had become the public symbol of progress. If that symbol cracked, the entire rebrand would collapse. The monarchy would lose a generation, and with it, its future. Fear 3, institutional collapse. Perhaps the most damning fear of all. If it ever became public that Meghan had a past connection to Andrew, and the palace still welcomed her in, then the institution itself would be seen not as incompetent but complicit. They would look careless at best, corrupt at worst. How could they strip Andrew and crown Meghan? How could they claim to vet royal spouses and miss this? The backlash would be nuclear. The press would devour them. The Commonwealth would fracture. The monarchy's moral authority, already on shaky ground, would vanish. So they did the only thing they believed they could. They stayed silent. No statements, no press briefings, no clarifications. They didn't defend Meghan. They didn't denounce her. They erased the question, and for a while, it worked. But silence is a dam, and behind it, so much pressure builds. Because silence doesn't make something go away. It makes it boil. And deep within that quiet, the most dangerous voice of all was stirring. Not the press, not the public, but the man who lost everything. Prince Andrew. Every secret has a keeper. Every scandal has a witness. And in the royal world, sometimes the only thing more dangerous than exposure is resentment. Prince Andrew was once protected, once shielded by titles, ceremony, and a palace that stood behind him even when the world began to whisper. But that protection vanished the moment Epstein's shadow swallowed his name. He wasn't warned, he wasn't eased out, he was erased, stripped of his titles, barred from royal duties, removed from the public eye. His fall was total and public. But here's what most people miss. Andrew didn't fall alone. He watched someone else, someone from the same world, the same orbit, rise untouched. Meghan. And that, insiders say, broke something in him. Because while Andrew was being devoured by the press, Meghan was being celebrated by it. While Andrew's ties to Epstein destroyed his future, Meghan's alleged presence in the same elite circles went unmentioned, uninvestigated, unquestioned. The double standard was glaring. And Andrew noticed. He didn't speak, not then. He took the punishment in silence because he believed the palace was still protecting him, that at some point the scales would balance. But they never did. And the years passed. The headlines faded. His reputation never recovered. And all the while, Meghan's star continued to rise, even after she and Harry stepped away, even after the scandals and interviews and tell-all memoirs. She still had the crown's silence. But Andrew, he had nothing left to lose. And that's when the whispers began. That Andrew was angry, that Andrew was bitter, that Andrew was ready to talk, not for justice, not for truth, but for revenge. Because if he was going to fall alone, he was going to make sure no one walked away clean. And he wasn't alone. Sarah Ferguson, Fergie, his ex-wife, his closest ally, his decades-long defender, was reportedly standing with him. Sources say Fergie knows more than she's ever let on. That during Meghan's alleged pursuit of Andrew, Fergie was the one who blocked it. That she saw the game being played long before Harry did. And that now, watching her family drag down while Meghan remained protected, she was done keeping silent. Together, they hold the keys. They were there when Meghan entered the social scene. They saw the introductions. They watched the connections form, not just with Andrew, but with others. And reportedly, they know why the palace panicked, because if even a fraction of what they know becomes public, it won't be a scandal. It will be a detonation. Andrew has no public duties left. He has no reputation left. He has no incentive to stay silent anymore. And when a man has nothing left to protect, he becomes the most dangerous person in the room. Because the moment he speaks, even one sentence, the silence ends. And the press, long held at bay, will come flooding back to ask the questions they were once too afraid to ask, to chase the stories buried by royal silence, to investigate everything. And when that happens, the entire institution shifts. Because this isn't just about Meghan anymore, it's about who protected her, who allowed her in, who kept the truth buried. Andrew may be disgraced, but in a world built on secrets, the disgraced are often the only ones willing to tell the truth. And when he does, it won't be a scandal, it'll be history, rewriting itself in real time. Every story has a breaking point, a moment where silence no longer protects, where secrets can't be contained, where history doesn't whisper, it roars. And for the modern royal family, for Meghan, for Harry, for the crown itself, that moment is drawing closer. Because according to those who've watched this unfold from the inside, there is still one truth left. One final piece that has never been spoken, never printed, never acknowledged. But it exists. And if it comes out, it doesn't just dent Meghan's reputation, it destroys it. Insiders say this truth is held by a small group, a triad of royal proximity: Prince Andrew, Sarah Ferguson, and surprisingly, Princess Eugenie. Not because Eugenie seeks destruction, but because she too saw things, heard things, connected dots the palace refused to name out loud. These three, bound by silence, loyalty, resentment, allegedly carry the key to the past Meghan thought had been erased. And what they know, according to sources, ties directly into three devastating threads: her past relationship with Andrew, her presence inside the Epstein social orbit, and the palace's conscious choice to say nothing, not because they believed she was innocent, but because they feared she wasn't. If this truth, this alleged final piece, is revealed, the fallout will not be containable, because it wouldn't just suggest Meghan had a past she hid from Harry, it would prove the palace knew that the monarchy, in its desperation to modernize, allowed someone in without revealing what they knew about her, that they protected her image while silently punishing Andrew for the same proximity, that the public face of progress, of change, of inclusion, of hope was built on omission, that behind the press releases and wedding gowns and charity speeches lay a truth too radioactive to say out loud. And that truth, insiders warn, is now on the edge of exposure, because Prince Andrew is tired of being the only one who paid the price, tired of watching the palace freeze him out while shielding someone he claims was once in the same circle. He is no longer playing defense. And if even a fragment of what he knows becomes public, if he names the places, the people, the times, it will all unravel. Meghan won't just lose status, she'll lose credibility. The Duchess image, the royal legacy, the global brand, all of it will fracture beneath the weight of one undeniable question. What if Meghan didn't marry into the royal family? What if she infiltrated it? Because if this truth confirms what some have whispered for years, that her rise was calculated, that her past was hidden, that her proximity to power was no accident. Then the fairy tale collapses, not just for her, but for Harry, for the monarchy, for everything they claim to stand for. The palace will look incompetent, or worse, complicit. The press will turn, brutally, rapidly. Public sympathy will vanish, and history once again will be rewritten, this time not in Meghan's favor. Because the danger doesn't come from journalists anymore. It doesn't come from commentators or critics or distant relatives. It comes from within, from the man who lost everything, from the woman who blocked the first move, from the daughter who watched the crown make the same mistake again. And when that silence breaks, when that truth is spoken, leaked, or revealed in court, in print, in whispers, it will be irreversible. No PR strategy will fix it. No Oprah interview will soften it. No rebranding campaign will cover it up, because some truths are too big to spin, too loud to bury. And this one, it could burn down the legacy Meghan spent years building, the royal story they tried to protect, and the institution that chose silence over transparency. That moment is coming. The only question is, who will speak first? Andrew, Fergie, Eugenie? Or will the truth erupt on its own like it always does? In the cracks, in the shadows, in the places no one watches, until it's too late. Because in this story, the ending has already begun, and the silence, it's about to shatter.